All right. Welcome to the show today, everybody. My name is Mike Brooks. I'm joined by Frank DiBenedetto over there. Over there.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. It is the live version of the Elevating IT podcast. So if you're listening later on iTunes or on Podbean, you're obviously not live with us. So you should come live with us every week at 2 p.m. on Friday. Join us and pop into the live stream on Facebook, on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/offerit. Or YouTube. Search for us on YouTube. You'll find a YouTube channel and you can watch there and enter yourself, put a comment in and let us know where you're at, what you're doing, how you are. Say hi. And if you have any questions. So as we're going through this podcast episode, as we're live, if you have stuff you'd like us to talk about or answer or just want to chime in on anything, sales formulas you can use in your MSP. And before we get into that, Frank, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. We had a busy week. It was much busier than I had anticipated, but good stuff. We onboarding a new client, and we wrote some new processes to do more of this remotely now. And so far, so good. Takes a little bit longer, but so far, so good.
Yeah, it's a crazy new world. My wife just told me that her company is not going to have people in the office until next year. And another friend of mine said the same thing. And we're in Connecticut, which is like the only state, I think, that's kind of in the green. We're going down. And they, in a state that's doing pretty well, are thinking we're not going to have people in an office for a year. So this remote thing is serious business, man.
Yeah. I stopped by my office today. I've been there 4 times in 4 months. I like to go once a month just to make sure the rent that I'm paying is going towards something that still exists. And I actually put together it's a hand sanitizer stand that I ordered. It has like our logo on it. And it says sanitize here with the big Two River Tech logo. So it's pretty cool. So that was, got me out of the house today and grabbed our mail and back in the home office.
Wow. We were out. Actually, I went to a restaurant last night for the first time since March. It was mine and my wife's 25th anniversary. So we went out to eat, and it was nice. It was weird. It wasn't.
You had steak, didn't you?
What's that?
Did you have steak?
I did not have steak. We went to an Italian place. Her favorite's Italian. So we did had a big bowl of pasta with like what seemed like about a quart of cream in it. It was like, I'm like, this is a little too much, but it was really good. And we were the only ones there in the outside dining. And it was like the one day a week, this week that wasn't raining, which was a surprise. So we sat outside. We had our masks on, which is weird. Every time the server comes over, you put your mask on. So it's not the most enjoyable thing, but we did it our first time.
Yeah, I haven't been out. The Red Bank town close to me. I went to pick up takeout about 2 weeks ago, and they had just opened the outdoor dining, and it literally looked like Mardi Gras in the streets. There's people weren't wearing masks. People were eating like on the sidewalks, basically. It was like, I couldn't understand it. I mean, honestly, like I'm not that hurting to go out to dinner that I would put myself in the middle of it. It just seemed like a recipe for disaster. I think that probably better off opening up the inside dining just at lower capacity than having everybody just piled into the streets and, on top of each other. But, just my own observation. I went in and got my takeout sushi and I left. So, see what happens. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't think we'll be back until September at least in our building, which is actually pretty cool. There's like floor maps, like stickers all over, and it says like this way with arrows. We walked by these 2 crazy cameras that hadn't been there before. And when we walked by, I looked back and there was a screen and a monitor, and it was taking pictures of your face, and it says mask. It says mask underneath it. So I don't know where that goes or what it is, but it was like the most like technologically advanced thing that I've seen so far come out of this, new environment. So that was pretty
Wow.
neat. Yeah. It's a
Sure.
little big brotherish, but it's kind of good to see, that they are taking it seriously. But yeah, all like traffic being directed in certain ways. You can't go up, certain stairwells are down only, other ones are up. Pretty interesting, what they're doing. So
Crazy. Well, let's say hi to Ken. Ken is here from Intercore Technologies. Ken, how are you doing? Good to see you. If you are here watching on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching, just put a comment in there. Let us know what's going on. Say hi. And if you have questions as we're going, we're happy to answer questions. Frank said he'll stay on here until midnight if he has to.
Yeah.
So anyway, in all seriousness, I want to talk about, we're talking about this week, something that I think is one of the most effective sales formulas that you can use in your MSP. And I want to talk first about where I first heard about this is in a copywriting course, actually, or from it's a copywriting strategy or mechanism. And I first learned about it from Dan Kennedy in this book, which is a great book called The Ultimate Sales Letter. Now, it's not, and I want to kind of preface this. I think that's the right use of the word. We're talking about selling, not necessarily writing copy. So this book is a great to learn how to write, how to write or sell. And it doesn't matter whether you're writing a sales letter. And Dan Kennedy comes from the world of direct response marketing, which is well before computers, well before the internet. The direct response marketers were, writing letters to mail or writing newspaper ads or magazine ads. And these were different from the ads of the day, which, direct response was all about getting a direct response, asking, compelling people with strong headlines, compelling people with strong salesmanship in the copy, and then getting them to take an action, which is basically what you do when you're in a sales situation. You're trying to connect with people, you're trying to emotionally connect with them and keep them engaged and walk them through a process to get past objections and then hopefully get the sale at the end of the process. So I love direct response copy and I love direct response books because they really are salesmanship in print. And all those strategies are it's almost like somebody said, let's take the way we sell and put it in a print format. So don't think of it as, well, I don't want to learn copywriting, because this is amazing stuff to have, good salesmanship. And the strategy is something called problem agitation solution, or problem agitate solve. It is a formula in the book, The Ultimate Sales Letter, right? I've got it pigeon, rabbit-eared, right? Rabbit-eared, problem agitate solution. And it's really about understanding deeply what the problems and pains of the client is, and then agitating it a little bit, right? Making, stirring up the pain and getting them to the point where they're like, I need to solve this problem. And then the solution to how we solve that is our solution. So you know what I'm talking about here. Frank, when did you first hear about this, or what's your take on this as a person who sells?
Yeah. So, little side story. I can't remember exactly how I heard of Dan Kennedy, but I had bought a bunch of his books probably 10 or 12 years ago. And I actually have The Ultimate Sales Letter, and I have a few of those kick-ass books that, they're like, time management, and I forget what they all are, but I remember reading some of them. Yeah, the No BS. Yeah. And, I remember trying to do or implement some of that in my own MSP. And I just found it very difficult to translate that stuff to the IT space. I guess I just doubted myself. This isn't really my forte. So although I would read it, it would make a lot of sense. I didn't know what to do. And Robin solved that problem, because when I met her in Newark about 12 years ago, she specifically mentioned Dan Kennedy, and that, she translated a lot of her material was driven off of the Dan Kennedy concept. So for me, it was a perfect fit. So I actually heard of Dan Kennedy about 12 years ago. I read that, probably didn't implement that. I think for me, probably where this kind of was more of an eye opener was sort of when I first heard about like the hero's journey. It's,
Mhm.
there's a bunch of different ones out there, Story Brand. I know we've talked about that. And I think that's where somebody actually put in writing, or the first time I saw that there's actually a story or a script that is followed, right? Where there's a hero who has a villain who's, introduced to a guide. And so this sort of follows that same sales mentality of, you've got to identify that villain or that problem for them, and then you've got to go deep and agitate it, because you really have to figure out not just the superficial issues, but like what's really bugging them. Like, why does that bother them? And I can tell you, like, I did this when we were redoing our website, and we had some verticals on there. One of them is legal, and everybody thinks that like all of your attorney clients are home biting their nails, worried about ransomware or spyware and stuff like that, or losing data to backups. And to be honest with you, what I found was that's not what's really bothering them. What's bothering them is the attorneys just never have enough time to get the work done, right? So it's efficiencies and things like that. But what you got to do is dig deeper into it, right? So to your point is you got to find what their problem is, and you only find out by listening, right? And too often we project onto them what their problem should be, and they might politely nod, and you're missing the mark. Basically what we were doing, once we really drilled into it, was we would listen to what they would tell us, and then we'd put that on the website, and then we would agitate that pain like even deeper. We'd remind them, how did you lose your last case because you couldn't get things done, or weren't able to get home and spend time with the kids nights and weekends? And that's like what you're talking about, really agitating the pain. Then if you have a solution that has all this tech stuff that leads to, hey, you'll have more time, you'll be more efficient. Now you have their attention, right? And it's hard to do, I think, because again, it requires you to abandon what you know and what you think they care about, and actually listen to them and let them tell you. And for me, a lot of times with my fact finding, I'm talking a lot right now, but in my fact finding, I'll ask a question and I'll just stay quiet. And they usually just spew out all the things that are important. You might think, oh, this is just mumbo jumbo because they're not talking tech, and I'm going to cut them off and redirect them. But I take a lot of notes. And many times they're basically saying to me, Frank, here's what I will buy from you if you present this back to me. And I've gotten pretty good at packaging that up amongst the rest of my solutions and getting them to say yes at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's and I want to reinforce that, don't be scared of reading books like these because they're about copywriting. I love, it's really it's hard to sell in print. If you can sell through a sales letter, compel somebody to pull out their credit card and buy, you can just translate that stuff. It's so much easier to translate it, I think, in person, because when you're in person with someone, that's where the human connection comes in, whether it's, on Zoom or in person. There's just a connection that happens when two people are looking at each other and talking to each other, and you hear each other. It just changes the dynamics. So, it's one of my favorite.
Marketing, which is really what you're talking about in that book, with the copywriting, is super important, because you're setting the frame or the stage for how the sale will go when the person approaches you, right? So you're almost pre-selling at that point. Right. So when you think you're selling, a lot of times people say that sale's already been made in the marketing portion. And for many people who don't love sales or really aren't in tune with that, they miss that point, right? So the marketing is super important. For many of us, our website is, that master sales letter. I know, I think, I've read that. I don't know if it was in Dan Kenny's book or not, but maybe Robin said that. But that's like your master sales letter. Everybody goes to that thing and looks at it, and they don't read it verbatim, but they get a pretty good sense of like what you offer, and they make a decision very quickly whether they think you might be able to help them or not. So, I think that the selling starts long before we think it starts.
Oh yeah, of course, it starts the moment they decide It starts before they met you. It starts when they decide they need to and start investigating something, because people just don't, well, some people do. Some people decide we need to change our IT provider. Let's go look for an IT provider. But a lot of people will say, I wonder how we can make sure our IT provider is doing a good job. Like, he said, our IT provider said this. Do we really need this? What do? They go to Google and they start looking for information on it. They start reading articles. Then they maybe come back to their IT provider and said, hey, I read something that says this. Or they go, my IT provider's not doing what he's contradicting this thing that I read. I trust this source, so maybe let me dig deeper. And if you're not blogging, if you're not creating content, you don't have an opportunity to kind of be an answer to those questions, right? So your blog is an extension of a part of your marketing strategy. A podcast, shows like this, where you're talking about things that you do, so that when somebody does go out and Google, you're going to show up. And now there's good copy elements in what you do, where you're talking about the problems, you understand the pains, you're doing those things that you should do in good writing, and you're leading people down a path. They end up calling you. They end up sitting with you, and how you talk to them. And so from start to finish, from even before start, really, really important. But the first time I used Dan Kennedy's stuff was actually before I got into copywriting. I was using it because I was part of they had like a inner circle, they called it at the time. I don't know what they call it now, but it was like a club, you go to locally. We actually had local chapters. And I went to it. Had no intention of being a copywriter or learning copywriting. I was just there for business connections, and I knew who Dan Kennedy was. So I went to it, and I realized that the process of copywriting, I can translate that and create like actually a sales script for myself. And that's how I wrote my first bunch of sales scripts, and how I was going to sit down and ask you questions during the sales process, and then turn that into my presentation. So I think learning this stuff, like reading that book, The Ultimate Sales Letter, first of all, it's like one of my favorite books on copywriting, because I think it's the easiest to learn. Like Dan Kennedy puts it in a way, because I've now, in the years since, I've taken multiple copywriting courses and trainings and read just about everything on copywriting. And Dan Kennedy is a great teacher at that. And his tools, like the problem, agitate, solution formula, is just one of many formulas he has. It's such a great, it's a great way to learn. But I use that for my sales scripts. So I challenge you to learn, if you read something like that, go through how you do your presentation. Mm-hmm. And write out how, because that's what I do with when I'm going out to sell, I'm writing out sales scripts and then practicing them, practice and internalize them.
I think too, one of the areas that's probably the weakest out of those three, if there's one to mess up, it's usually the agitate, because a lot of salespeople are, they know they're usually the solution looking for the problem, right? So you find someone who has a problem, and then you jump right to your solution. And the agitate was an area that I used to miss. I didn't go deep enough to really dig into the pain and really get them thinking. And I think the emotion, we know people buy based on emotion, right? So I think that it's important to not glaze over that problem and miss that agitate part, because if you go too quickly, your solution doesn't really resonate with them, right? You really gotta dig in.
Right.
I know sales process wise, even website, we redid our website, and we had a consultant help with a story brand approach to it. And the first thing he pointed out is, you don't talk about the pain enough on your site. You catch them with a headline, piques their interest, and then you want them to take an action, but you don't agitate the problem, or you don't remind them, what failure might look like for them, like the ransomware or losing data or, whatever. So I think that out of the three is probably the one that most people are the weakest in. It's probably the easiest to dig into, because if you keep baiting that hook for that prospect, they'll keep talking, right? And you can keep them talking, and they will keep figuring out more and more pain. So as long as you're able to listen, I think that's actually easy to do. Most of us hate listening. We talk about ourselves in sales, right? And we kind of miss the point there too.
Yeah, that's and one of there's another strategy I was taught long time ago. I think it was actually a Dan Kennedy consultant who taught me this. I can't remember who originally, but I think it was in the Dan Kennedy world. When questioning people, people will first, like sometimes when you ask a question, the first answer is oftentimes a lie. Like it may not be, and they're not lying on purpose. They don't realize they're lying. You say, "Hey, how are you doing?" What does everybody say to how you doing? Great, fine. Nobody says, "I had the worst day yesterday. Thanks for asking." And then they like unload on you what happened, at home. They lie to you. So, you got to probe. And he used to tell me, like, you ask your question, you set the table, you get past that first lie, and you start getting into what the real problem is. And you have to put on your thinking cap to understand, is this the end? And I think a lot of people, the reason he taught this is because a lot of people stop. They get an answer and they stop. So what he does is he does a thing called saying "so that," right? Like at the end of what they say, "so that," and he doesn't say it that way, but that's the idea is so what's next, or continue on. So if you say, this cybersecurity stuff's really confusing, your answer would be like, and so tell me more about what that means, or just tell me more, to prompt them to tell you more. So what you're trying to do is peel back the layers and get them to tell you what the real pain is. So, and he went through an exercise. I watched him do this where he was doing an example with a woman and kept asking her, "So what does that mean to you? So what does that do? What happens next?" And the woman actually started crying at the end of it, because she got so deep down into what the pain was that, she would have bought anything. We were just doing a role play thing, but that's the idea is get them to continue talking about.
I think the lie part too is just a natural defense mechanism, because people, don't necessarily want to tell you about all the bad things that, are going on. Nobody likes to say, well, our network is really bad shape. We don't back up. We don't do these things, right? They're just hoping that they think maybe you'll just solve these, but we'll never actually like discuss all the bad stuff that we think is going on. But I often, many times when I start a prospect meeting, as you don't even talk about myself, I said, "So tell me a little bit about, why I'm here, like what makes you think Two River might be able to help you?" And
Right.
That a lot of times gets them talking. And, many times they want to know about, well, tell us about Two River Tech. And I'm like, well, before we do that, I said, I'm more interested in hearing about why I'm here. Because I don't know, maybe I can or can't help you. And again, that's part of that sales technique too, which is a little bit of a deeper conversation. But I just get them talking and keep talking. And, I don't talk a lot about us. I assume that I'm there already because of what they've seen, right? So that's where the pre-sale comes in. Like they've already somehow, I'm there because either something else convinced them that I'm an expert, and that's so I don't really feel like now I have to convince them of that again. Interesting stuff. It's pretty cool. There really is formulas, and there is a psychology here. A lot of people just go in with a proposal and think that you just have to dazzle them with what you know. And you and I had talked about like the croc brain and the mentality about people's initial reactions are to react quickly to that stuff and determine fight or flight. A lot of times you give them a proposal and it's flight mode because they don't want to spend money. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, once you get to the real pain, and we're not going to beat this up anymore. I recommend checking that book out if you want to read the book. If you don't want to read the book, just do a Google search on problem, agitate, solution, and you'll find all sorts of stuff. It's just really simple, right? Like uncover the problem and really uncover the problem, not what you think the problem is. And you only do that through listening, through, again, asking those, so what's next, or tell me more. That's a great way to do it on a sales call. Like if I'm on a sales call, I used to do phone sales a lot, and I would just, when they're done talking, I would say, tell me more.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what those words do to get people to open up. It might not be on the very first time you do it, but they will eventually open up. And I have a friend who is a master at this. He just doesn't start talking, counts to like 7 in his head or 8 in his head before he says anything. Because what normally happens is if you don't talk right away, the people will continue talking. And it's really, it works. And, it'll help you uncover that problem and then agitate it. Once you've got that problem, man, show them what, here's what life could look like if we don't fix this. I mean, this could be really bad. This could happen. This could happen. This could happen. What if this happened too? That's, agitate. They're like, okay, what's the solution for all this? And that's where we come in. So let's say hi to JT here. JT is in Expedient Technology Solutions here. Thank you guys for coming today. We're getting just about a half hour, so we're getting ready to wrap up. So we'll be back next week and with same time, same channel. And any parting words of wisdom, Frank, from the MSP headquarters of New Jersey?
You just mentioned reading books, and it's something that I've always enjoyed. Is reading different books, and as we get busier, sometimes we don't read as many. And the last couple months, I've forced myself, to not just sit and watch Netflix the whole time, although I watch plenty of that. But I've read some good books, and I'm reading one right now. Maybe we'll talk about it as your recommendation. Maybe we'll talk about it in the upcoming weeks. But it's always fun to read books that validate things you're doing or explain why they work. Because sometimes we just do things that work and you don't even know why. And then I read and go, oh man, there's actually someone actually wrote down why this works. So it's pretty cool. So maybe do a little book club type stuff. Talk about that in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's what I love about audit, and why I was attracted to audit when you first presented it to me. Is because it's a lot of the best sales books are, and one of our users actually said this, one of the people who use audit said this, he read a book that I recommended, and he goes, that book was audit in print. And it really is true. Like, I'm reading a book called How to Sell Your Way Through Life. It's a book by Napoleon Hill. It's 100 years old. Yeah. And it's the same sales principles that we talk about today. It's, when you peel this stuff back and you look at what works, it's the same damn sales principles. And I'll just leave you off. I'll give you a parting thing. I love this. He goes, sales presentation delivered by an able showman is a show all by itself and as interesting as a play. Moreover, it carries the prospective buyer through exactly the same mental process that a good play does. And what he's getting at here is that you can't just go out there and sell. You have to actually turn it into a show. You have to make it emotional. All of the reasons why audit works. Uh-oh, our connection went unstable. Did
you froze on me. Now you're back. I don't know.
All right.
I could tell you it's raining like crazy in New Jersey right now. There's some trouble.
Yeah, we got thunder, lightning, all sorts of crazy stuff. There's a storm coming, so we probably good time to end.
That's our cue to wrap up.
Exactly. Well, have a great week, everybody. Thanks for coming, and please let us know how we can help you guys. If you have questions, stuff you want us to cover in future episodes here, please let us know.